Since starting the YouTube channel Machining with Joe 3 years ago, the workshop has expanded massively and I've acquired a lot more new tooling. So in this video I want to give you guys a guided tour of the workshop and do some upgrades on the machines by using other machines in the workshop to do so. First upgrade I want to do today then is on my Warco Major GH40 milling machine. So this is the only mill I've ever known here in the workshop and it served me really well. So much so it moved over to the new workshop. So what upgrade are we going to be doing? On most modern pieces of machinery then, you have these scales which are called DROs and they basically display where the table is relative to its position, and that gets displayed on an LCD screen. But because my machine was a little bit older, I had to retrofit these scales, and in doing so it's now meant that my table locks for the X and Y movement aren't usable. So these were the standard ones, and for a while now I've been making do with this M8 bolt and just doing that and loosening it with an Allen key when needed. So this is the first thing we're going to get upgraded today on the mill. Before we get started then, we're going to need some metal. And just recently I started storing all the offcuts of metal in my toolbox. So other than metal, I store a lot of hand tools in here, spanners, sockets, screwdrivers, stuff like that. But for this project we're only focusing on the metal, so looks like I've sourced some, and really easy having this in here to find the metal that you need really quickly. My lathe then. I have a Harrison M300 lathe from the late 80s, early 90s. And compared to my mini lathe, this thing is a beast. It's 650 kilos and it's an absolute unit of good old engineering. So the machine itself runs off a 3-phase power source, which I've managed to get one of these transwave converters to convert my single phase incoming household electric to 3-phase to power this beast up, which has been ideal since owning it. Measurement wise on this lathe, centre to centre we're looking at about 750mm, but by the time you include chucks and tailstock tooling you're looking at about 600mm workable space. And as for the swing of this, we're looking at about 6 inches or 150mm, and that is with the gap bed in. If you remove the first portion of the lathe, which is where the gap comes from, you're looking more about 9 inches. So features on the lathe, this has got power feed in both the X and the Y position, and that comes in real handy when turning down stock or trying to get a consistent face off or parting any stock. So really good feature to have on the lathe. The power feed on this lathe then is something I'm really grateful for, just because it can give really consistent finishes and they normally end up in good finishes on the parts. So that's a massive win-win for this lathe. Another feature which the lathe has then is this foot pedal down the bottom which acts as a brake. I mainly find myself then using the foot brake when using the die in the tailstock. The main reason for this is I don't want to remove my hand from the piece of tooling, so being able to use the foot brake to stop the lathe is really good. When it comes to machine settings then, although there appears to be lots of dials here, it isn't that complicated. So the 2 dials that we have at the top here, they're for your spindle speeds. So this side here selects more of the RPM. This one here selects high, medium, low speed settings, all displayed at the top with quite clear arrows. The knob that you see here is for lead screw direction, so with this on the left hand side the carriage will move towards the chuck, and moved over to the right hand side the carriage will move away from the chuck. Next we've got the gearbox settings down here, So this is really important for thread cutting and also getting the speeds right when turning down stock to get really nice finishes. Getting these machine settings right then, along with the use of the power feed, makes doing operations like parting, which on the mini lathe used to be terrifying, an absolute breeze. And the final feature I just want to touch on that this lathe has, and it's something that I made in the workshop, is just this quick change tool post. So having a load of holders spare with different tooling in, being able to quickly swap out, makes using the lathe so much easier and more efficient, because using tools just becomes really easy. So that's the Harrison M300. Over on the Warco WM180 then, this is actually the first lathe I ever owned, and it's where the channel sort of grew from. This mini lathe to start with was absolutely insane. Once I'd done a few upgrades to this thing, this machine was actually really capable. So again, going through some of the stats, this thing runs off a 50-watt DC brushed motor, which compared to the 2.2 kilowatts that the other lathe has, seems pretty small in comparison. Centre to centre, out of the box this thing says it's 300mm, which accurately, centre to centre, it probably is about 300mm, but actual workable distance on this, you normally end up with about, what have we got there, with a tailstock in, you've got 250mm there from chuck to live centre, which, okay, it's not too bad, it's workable. The main thing I use this for now is more intricate work or second operations once I've done parting procedures on the big lathe. Just like the big lathe then, this also has a quick change tool post and tool holders, just because I like it so much. So originally this was the first lathe, like I said, I owned. This was the first quick change tool post I fitted, and by using this made me want to get one on the big lathe when I got that. So that's the reason we've got a quick change tool post and holder on this lathe. A few other features on this lathe while we're touching on it. I have got a DRO fitted to it. That's in both the X and Y position, and I've also got a tailstock DRO fitted for really intricate drilling operations where you need to know exactly how deep you're going. So other than that, I don't think there's much more to say on this mini lathe. If you're interested in a mini lathe or thinking about purchasing one, I've left a video in the link in description and also up in the top corner there, which goes over the 10 upgrades that I've done on this lathe, which I think are really essential if you buy one of these. With all the lathe work now done on this, we need a way of fixturing this securely for when we head over to the milling machine. And the new tool chest that I've got in the centre of the workshop is where I hold all this sort of equipment. So as this is a new piece of equipment in the workshop, I thought I'd share it with you guys in this video, as you wouldn't have seen it in any other workshop tour videos. The main reason then I wanted to add this sort of central island to the workshop is because I wanted a place where all the sort of tools that I use across all machines would live centrally. It's also quite nice to have a nice workable top which you can gain access anywhere from the workshop. But in here I have things like my vernier calipers in here, digital calipers, DTI gauges. They all sit in the top drawer just because that's the majority of the tools that I use on a regular basis, whether I'm on the mini lathe, the big lathe, the milling machine. So having them there is really handy. Then moving down, we have sort of more of our, what should we call, specialised tooling. We have all our micrometers set here with a micrometer stand that was 3D printed, and we also have all the carbide inserts here for all the lathe tools and a few that get used over on the milling machine. Now we're starting to get into really specialised pieces of equipment. So in here we have our gauge blocks set, we have our parallels, we have Starrett telescoping gauges. Really specialised stuff lives in this drawer. Now moving down, oh, can we still see? Let's move you over a bit. So moving down into the slightly bigger drawers, this is where I keep my dividing head, collet set and collet block. So we're going to be needing that for the next operation. And let's just find out what size collet we need. So we're going to be doing off that shank 8.5 mil. That one there. So we'll leave that out for the next operation. But that's what we have in there, dividing head and collet. And then in the last drawer, don't want to pull this out too much, we have a 6-inch rotary table, and we also have an aluminium fixture plate which I machined up for a previous job for a customer. So that all lives in here. As it's really heavy, I don't want to open these drawers that often in case it topples over. So after going through that, I think it's time we head over to the milling machine and finish off this little job. When I first got this milling machine then, it completely changed the projects that I could take on here within the workshop. So the table on this thing is, it's about 700mm wide by 200mm deep. And although that's the surface area of the table, the travel is quite a bit less than that. But nonetheless, having this here in the workshop meant that I could go from turning down round bar to actually being able to machine in features and square parts, including stuff like dovetails, slots, holes, stuff like that. So having a milling machine in the workshop is a must-have, in my opinion, if you're going to be doing machine work. These go hand in hand with a lathe. Just touching on the milling machine itself, so again this mill is made by a company called Warco, and this is a GH40 milling machine. So the GH means it's a geared head, so you've not got a variable speed drive like some modern day benchtop mills. You've actually got, again, a set of levers where it changes the gear ratio in there, and that in turn adjusts the speed and torque output of the spindle. So all this is powered by a 1.1 kilowatt single phase motor, which gives this thing a bit of oomph actually. I've been able to drill 30mm holes with a massive drill bit, no problems at all. So that's pretty impressive. With that hole all now drilled out on the milling machine, our lock is all now finished, and just by snugging that up now means the table doesn't go anywhere. So really happy with that. Moving away from the milling machine then, I just want to give you an idea of how the flow in my workshop actually works. So this bench that you can see here, this is what I consider the dirty bench, the working bench. So any welding, any assembly work, anything like that, that normally goes on this bench here. So the vise that you see here is again what I consider the dirty vise. Any grinding, cutting, hacksaw work, that goes on in that vise. The back there we've got the sonic cleaner for cleaning parts. So moving around, we've got the bandsaw there. So when I need to cut any large stock or any round bar, that normally gets pulled out and that gets used sort of where it sits. Doesn't get moved around the workshop too much, just a sort of in and out motion. And moving around some more, we've got this bench here. So this bench is what I consider the clean bench. So we've got the surface plate there. This is a Mitutoyo 0 grade surface plate, and we've also got the DTI and height gauge there. So any final inspection work goes on there checking that we've hit all our dimensions before parts get packed up and shipped out to customers for any customer orders. We also have a cutting mat here. Very rarely do I do cutting. I use it more for any free-handed technical drawings that I don't really want to jump onto CAD and do an actual technical drawing for. Normally do it over there on some A3 paper. And then finally we've got our really nice vise. Again, this is used for mainly clean work, final assembly work, stuff like that. Very rarely will this get used for any form of cutting or grinding. And I know what you're thinking, you've got a surface grinder there, surely it's going to get contaminated. Well, it's a bit bodgy, but I've actually put up a curtain, so whenever I use the surface grinder, this curtain gets pulled across and it keeps the majority of the dust and surface grinding swarf sort of contained in that area. So with that in mind, let's now head over to the surface grinder and talk you through that and how special it is to me here in the workshop. This surface grinder then is a Herbert Junior grinder from the early 1900s. So backdating the serial number on this, it would appear this is almost 100 years old to the day, and after a small refurb which I've done in some previous videos, this thing is good as gold. If you're unsure then what a surface grinder is, let me briefly run you through some of the components which go into making up one of these. So the business end of the machine is the magnetic chuck. There are other ways of fixturing work, but mainly people use a magnetic chuck, and from there we can position our steel parts on here and lock it down using this lever which magnetizes the whole thing. From there we can take cuts using the grinding wheel that we've got attached to the machine to take really light passes off of the work, giving an excellent surface finish. The controls of the machine are pretty much down here. So the hand wheel on the right operates the table up and down. Centre hand wheel brings the table in and out. And the one that gets used mainly is this lever style handle here, which pulls the table backwards and forth. So that's most of the controls as such, but how does this thing actually operate and how is it powered? Going around to the back of the machine then, down there we can see our 3-phase motor, and the motor that came on this machine wasn't any good. The windings had all fallen apart and all the insulation had crumbled, providing no insulation at all. So in the video where I restored this machine, that 3-phase motor got fitted and the old one got removed. But again, being 3-phase here in my workshop, how do you think I'm powering that? Well, here's the little secret. Up here you can see this little flashing LCD screen. What this unit is actually a VFD or variable frequency drive, and what that does is again allows you to use single phase electric to power 3-phase motors. And don't know if any of you guys have noticed, it's got this strange looking box around it. Well, this box and also the guard down here, they are all 3D printed. So because some of this stuff is so specialised and there's not really any out there that you can go and buy, stuff like this has to be 3D printed or manufactured in a very unique way. So that's the thing we're going to move on to next. The 3D printer. So I won't spend too long on this 3D printer. It's made by a company called Bamboo Labs, and I purchased this thing earlier on in the year just after it came off a Kickstarter campaign. So what makes this 3D printer very special and very unique is just the speeds in which it can 3D print stuff, but also the fact that you can easily choose from 4 materials up here in the material loading area. So For me here in the workshop, it makes projects like you've just seen on the surface grinder, but also anything that I want to prototype, really easy and also really quick for a workshop my size. I don't feel like I need to go into too much more detail on the 3D printer. I have got other videos on the channel where I've done projects with a 3D printer and just giving you a bit more information on that. So if you're interested in that, go check those videos out. But I think for now, all you guys really need to know is in the workshop, we've got a Bamboo Lab X1 Carbon 3D printer. So that sums up the Workshop Tour 2023 update video. I hope you guys have enjoyed having a look around the workshop, seeing what changes I've made and getting a general feel for how things flow here in the workshop. This isn't the first time I've done a workshop tour video. This is actually video number 3. So it just goes to show how the channel's progressing, how the workshop's progressing and how I'm progressing as a machinist. Each video, if you decide to go back and watch them from when I was in the little garage to when we first moved into this workshop and to where we are today, you can see the progression we've made along the way. So thank you for joining me in this video today. Again, hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. And until next time guys, happy machining and see you in the next one.